So, good news. The cask is gone. I'm still jumping around on crutches though. I'm not allowed to put any weight on the leg. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, feel free to check my last video about my crash. Anyway, I was thinking about how to record this video, disassembling the crashed victim. Not being able to move around so smoothly, adjusting lights and cameras and stuff. I decided to try and strap the GoPro on me and do that all in kind of a first-person view. Unfortunately, I messed up one setting on the camera, the shutter speed, so there might be some weird artifacts going on there. So I hope you will forgive me for that. It's a bit of a different perspective compared to my usual videos, but feel free to leave feedback in the comments what you think about this angle. If it would be worth doing again, say for example to build up the new bike. Anyway, let's get on with it. And if you're interested, I will leave a list of all the tools I used in the description. Let's go. So because I'm still on crutches, I had not cleaned the bike since the crash, so it was pretty filthy. So the first thing that had to come away was a chain, just to keep it from getting all dirty all over me, my clothes or the room. I will put a new chain on the eventual new bike, but I still kept the old chain just to have it as a reference to measure the new one. It would be nice to try something new, like a KMC chain or something like that, but we'll see what happens. Since the fork was just hanging from the hose, I thought it was best to get that sorted. So just remove the brake pads, as you don't want to get any brake fluid on the pads if you want to use them again. Mine is in still pretty good condition, so I should be able to use them for the next bike. Just cut the hose there, and you will have a few drops of brake fluid coming out, so I just use a simple plastic bag to catch the few drops that comes out when you cut the hose. Once you pump the lever a few times, you will probably get out some more, and as you disconnect the cable from the lever, the rest will probably come out as well. I just try to not get it all over the floor, but it can be pretty messy anyway. Then I just remove the brake caliper from the fork. On this open, you actually bolt it through the fork. And as you can see, the balls are actually pretty nasty. I don't know if this is because I wash my bike like a freak or something like that, but I should be able to clean this off pretty easily with something like WD-40 556 or some degreaser. Then I just disconnected the hose from the caliper. As you can see, once you disconnect that, you will get some more brake fluid coming out, so have your plastic bag ready. I did cut the hose here and made sure I kept the hose nut. If you buy new hoses, you probably get the nuts with the hoses, but it can never hurt to have a few extra lying around. Then I just put the bolts back in to just make sure I don't lose them or confuse them with something else. Then it was time to get the verdict on the handlebars. These Easton EC70AX handlebars is probably one of my most favorite parts on the bike. I was secretly hoping that it would still be usable, but thinking about how this crash happened, the realist in me kind of knew it was not something I will be able to use on the new bike. Such is life though. Anyway, it's time to remove the handlebar Di2 junction. And then remove the broken shift lever, which is, as you can see, is beyond repair for sure. And if you look on the inside here, you can see it has really damaged the handlebar. So I would definitely not be riding these again. So then I removed the Di2 cables and they looked pretty okay, but I will test these once everything is disassembled again, so make sure that everything works fine. And if something doesn't, need to be replaced. After I got the lever off the handlebar, it was time to disconnect the hose from the lever, and I have my right shifter connected to my rear brake. The normal style, not the Japanese or UK style. Off with the hose. And As you can see, the shifter here is definitely going to the shifter graveyard. Even though you get new hose nuts with new hoses, I will still keep these as spares, because you never know when you might need them. As the stereo tube is tapered on the bottom, I thought it would be impossible to remove it from the top of the stereo tube, so I decided to try and remove the stem from the stereo. Unfortunately, the compression cap was damaged, so I couldn't get that out. I ended up just removing the top cap and leaving the compression plug in the stereo. That way I could at least remove the handlebar and stem from the stereo tube. Although you would expect that the crash would have damaged the headset bearings, they seemed to turn nice, so decided to keep this as well as spares, because yeah, you never know. Always good to have it lying around. And I actually managed to pull the stereo through the top in the end. Getting the upper bearing and headset assembly off the stereo tube was a bit of a chore though, since the expander plug was still left in the tube. It was really tight, but I got it off in the end. And just put this in a Ziploc bag for safekeeping. Then I removed the frame stop or the cable stop, and realized soon I needed to remove the shrink wrap tubing as well. Just use a hobby knife to cut this open very carefully, so I didn't cut any cables. After that was gone, removing the stop was no problem at all. So I will just keep this stopper as a spare part as well. Just put back on the little screw so I don't lose that. Then I moved down to the bottom part of the bike, removed the rear derailleur. It didn't seem to have any damage at all, so that was good news at least. I will still connect all the Di2 parts together once everything is disassembled, just to make sure everything is working as it's supposed to. Then it was time to remove the crank. It's pretty straightforward. There was no superficial damage on the crank or anything, so I think this will be no problem to use on the new bike, which is a good thing. I've done so many videos on crank removal and installation, so check that link up in the corner if you're interested. The crank came out, no problem, just a quick wipe to get the nastiest stuff off, and then I will do a more thorough clean later on. For that though, I will just put everything back together so I don't lose any small parts. Then I removed the seat post and disconnected the battery for the Di2 system. And as I mentioned in my crash video, super stoked that my Berg saddle didn't have any damage at all, wasn't scuffed or anything. So the next thing I did was remove all the bolts and bolt cages and everything that basically sticks into the frame, because I will try to remove all the Di2 wiring through the head tube without removing the bottom bracket. The reason for that is I don't have a bottom bracket removal tool at hand. I will just remove all the possible obstacles for the wires to snag on inside a frame. That means I also need to remove the rear brake hose before I get to the wiring. So that was the next step. Just remove the little safety pin from the caliper, and then just remove the bolts through the chain stay. Then I cut the hose and had my plastic bag ready to catch any eventual brake fluid coming out. After that, I could just pull the hose out through the bottom of the head tube. Pretty simple. Since this is pretty long hose, I will actually keep this and use this hose again for the front brake on my eventual new bike. So that's one place you could save a few pennies if you want to. So I will pull out the Di2 wiring through the bottom of the head tube as well. But before that, I will open the little cable guide at the bottom bracket and try to fish out the Di2 cables from the rear mech and the battery to make it a bit more easier and remove any cable clips that might be visible. In my case, I had to fish one cable around the bottom bracket to make it a bit easier to pull it through. But once I did that, it was no problem. I could just fish everything out in one piece. And the reason I could do that without risking disconnecting the cable was I had secured the down tube cable with a zip tie around the internal junction when I built up the bike. So even if I pull this, I didn't risk disconnecting the junction and have that stuck in the frame. So that was a good call back when I built it up. So taking another look at the damage on the actual frame. We have these 2 cracks at the seat stay on the non-drive side. It still felt very stiff and everything, so I don't know how superficial or not they are. Another area I found a crack was the head tube bottom bearing cup that had a bit of a crack on the inside. So this frame is definitely nothing I will take a chance on to ride again. There's still a few parts we can salvage from this frame. To start with, the through axles are in good working condition, so we will definitely keep those. If we don't use them on the next bike, we might be able to do something like DIY bike stand or something like that. Another part we can salvage is the rear hanger. You actually get an extra hanger with the frame as well, so if I get a replacement open up, I will have a total of 4 hangers, which should keep me going for a couple of seasons hopefully. With the frame down, moving back to the last part of the handlebar, the seemingly working shift lever. As you can see, it did take a hit as well, as you can see by the marks left on the drop, but hopefully it will work. The stem also seemed to be in good working order. I checked all the bolts and none of them were bent or had any visible damage. But yeah, the bars is nothing that will be used again, unfortunately. The stem, though, like I said, looks fine, so we'll definitely try to reuse that. So that's it for the actual disassembling of the bike. As you can see here, I just connected all the Di2 parts together just to make sure everything was working. Of course, one shift lever was totally down for, but the other one is still working. So I might just buy a new rubber hood or something like that to make it look a bit more fresh and try to source a new one for the right side. So that's it. Bike disassembled and I almost said ready. I know now what parts I need to buy to build up the new bike. Just off the top of my head, I need the right shifter, new handlebars, some brake hoses, I need a new chain and some other bits and pieces. We will go over that in an upcoming video. If you found this interesting and helpful, leave a like and subscribe if you feel like it's always appreciated. And I will catch you in the next one. Hopefully I might be able to walk again. Peace!